Well, speaking of great women, let's talk about International Women's Day. That's today. Two women in tech headlines caught our eyes today. Let's do the good news first. Motherboard put together an A to Z of women pushing boundaries in science and technology. The list includes Kate Darling, a research specialist at MIT's Media Lab, who is a leading expert in robot ethics. Thank you, Kate. Whitney Phillips, who spent 4 years undercover as a 4chan troll and who researches the cultural impact of memes. And Njeri Rionge, serial entrepreneur in Kenya, who founded the most successful cable, broadband, and internet-based phone companies in East Africa. And Manoush Zomorodi, host of the tech podcast Note to Self, who we will be interviewing on this show next week. Lots of women in technology.
Turns out I'm surrounded by a couple right now, in fact.
You are.
So I don't know. All I can say is that, I've worked in the tech industry for 10 years. And I think a big part of this, at least as it relates to this show, is the tech industry. It seems like this constant story that keeps coming up, both, from a minority aspect and also from women in tech and that sort of stuff. And I feel like I've been surrounded by awesome, smart women in my career, and I've learned so much from them. So it's I guess a different perspective than I suppose a lot of other people have, apparently, because that is absolutely not the way that it is, elsewhere. And I don't know how I got so lucky. So there you go.
Well, you're surrounded by women. Your wife's an uber feminist. You have 2 daughters. You are a feminist. So it's not, you work in a place that actually has women there.
That is true.
Those things help.
That is absolutely true.
I have a friend who, she models for a living, mathematical models, that is. And she is always in these sausage fest startup companies. And it's really a challenge, she says, because they're young guys who have been around other young guys. And it's not just the big tech companies where they're working really hard on diversity and changing culture, but also in the smaller companies where they're just bootstrapping and scrambling. And in those environments, it's young people. There's not a lot of infrastructure in the companies. And I think there isn't as much foundation and infrastructure for diversity and having an openness to women there. I mean, just little stuff like having to breastfeed in the bathroom, people being uncomfortable when you say you're pregnant, stuff like that she's told me that is not perfect. That being said, I just went through and made my own little honor roll in the big tech companies. Mary Meeker, huge VC here at Kleiner Perkins, Sheryl Sandberg, Marissa Mayer, Meg Whitman, Xerox's CEO, Ursula Burns, Ginny Rometty, IBM's CEO, the CTO at Cisco, Padmasree Warrior, I hope I said that right, the Wojcicki sisters, YouTube's CEO, 23andMe co-founder. One we don't talk about a lot, Cher Wang. She's the co-founder of HTC, and now she's their CEO. So some inroads, some problems.
Right. I mean, that was the other headline from CNET, said that there was a so-so year for technology, but I don't really agree with that. I mean, they used as an example that one login engineer ads that we remember from last year, there was an attractive woman in one of the ads, and a bunch of people said, well, that woman's not really an engineer. They must have hired a model to do that. And in fact, they did not. She was actually an engineer. But that started the I Look Like an Engineer movement, which I think brought to light this problem and was a positive in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a big part, of all of this is kind of goes back to STEM education and, looking kind of at the younger years in elementary school and junior high and all that kind of stuff, how much engagement let's say women, for example, have with science, technology, just the STEM kind of framework. Has that changed? Are we at a point where that has actually changed and hopefully for the better? What do you guys think?
I hope so. I mean, I don't think that my daughter and son get treated really differently in school when they're learning these things. I mean, my daughter takes a robotics class. I don't think she gets treated differently. So I'm hoping, but that's just my own experience with my own children. Well,
and then you kind of go backwards. Like when I was a kid, it was very, common to hear that something was, that's a boy's thing, or that's a girl's thing, when related to, let's say, mathematics is just one example. And I really hope that we're at a point to where that isn't happening as much, if at all. I know I know I can only speak for myself, and we certainly don't prescribe to that. So we try and make sure that our daughters realize that they truly can be interested and find something that maybe 20, 30, 40 years would have been pegged as a boys thing, that they can explore that as long as they're happy. I think my thoughts on this always kind of come around just in a general sense that I hope that we get to a point in this world where we don't feel that we need to talk about women in technology or minorities in technology or just in general, because it's just so normal that it's not weird and or outside of the norm. And that's where I feel like we're constantly at right now. And not that it's a bad thing to talk about it. I think that's kind of how you raise awareness around that. But man, I hope that someday we get to a point to where it's just kind of normal. And so talking about it doesn't even occur to you because it's just the way it is, and the way that we don't really talk about men in technology because there's a lot of dudes in tech. Like that, it's been that way for years. So it's, not so outside of the norm that we feel like we need to talk about it. I don't know. Anyways, that's my
Well, I
soapbox.
do see some change. I mean, walking around Yahoo, it's like a skit out of Silicon Valley, the show on HBO. There is that pack, there's like 2 white guys, 2 Southeast Asian guys, and a woman. Like, it's just bizarre that is always like a pack of 5 that's walking around. And you're sort of thinking, maybe we are such a cultural melting pot here in Silicon Valley where it really doesn't feel like the cultural issues are happening as much in the tech industry. It's still, I mean, don't get me wrong, we're not seeing enough African Americans in these industries, and we do still see women falling away from science and math in those middle school years. But I think it's a slow progression. And to your point, Jason, it's not women in tech, it's people in tech.
Exactly.